The coffee was still steaming. That's what haunted fisherman Lars Pedersen most, how the ceramic cup felt warm against his weathered palm when he found the Hansen family's cottage empty that grey June morning. The door hung open like a scream, frozen in Nordic air. 3 plates of half-eaten breakfast, 3 beds with pillows still holding the shape of sleeping heads, but no family, no voices, no life. Emma's Danish fairy tale book lay spread across the kitchen table, pages fluttering. In the Baltic breeze that shouldn't have been inside. Her mother's reading glasses perched on the open text, as if Astrid had just looked up from the words. The father's architectural sketches scattered across the wooden floor. Precise lines documenting Læsø's ancient salt works. The last thing Morten Hansen would ever draw. Their rental car sat undisturbed in the gravel driveway. Suitcases remained packed. Even Emma's beloved marine biology collection sat untouched on the cottage windowsill, seashells arranged with 12-year-old precision. Everything exactly as it should be, except for the family. Lars had lived on Læsø Island for 63 years. He'd seen summer storms swallow fishing boats, watched winter ice claim the reckless. But in a place where neighbors check on neighbors, where every soul is accounted for during Danish summer nights that stretch toward eternity, families don't just dissolve into Nordic mist. But what happened in the vast seascape surrounding this remote Danish island remained a mystery that even the most experienced maritime rescue services couldn't solve. Morten Hansen embodied everything Copenhagen valued in its architects: methodical precision wrapped in Danish humility, a man who designed buildings that seemed to grow from Nordic soil rather than impose upon it. At 42, his sustainable coastal developments had earned recognition throughout Scandinavia, each project reflecting his deep understanding of how Danish communities could thrive while respecting the raw power of Nordic waters. His office overlooked the Copenhagen harbour, where he'd spend lunch breaks sketching traditional fishing boats, always seeking to understand how Danish maritime culture shaped the structures that housed it. Astrid Hansen commanded respect at the University of Copenhagen, where her Nordic literature courses drew students from across Europe. She possessed that rare academic gift of making ancient Scandinavian sagas feel immediate and vital, her passion for storytelling evident in how carefully she'd planned every detail of their Læsø Island retreat. She'd chosen this specific destination after months of research, drawn by the island's authentic preservation of Danish maritime traditions, the traditional saltworks that had once supplied Nordic kingdoms, the unique quality of light that had inspired generations of Scandinavian painters, the way the Kattegat's waters shifted from deep blue to silver depending on atmospheric pressure and Nordic sky conditions. Their daughter Emma represented the best of contemporary Danish childhood, intellectually curious, environmentally conscious, fluent in multiple languages by age 12, yet deeply rooted in her Nordic heritage. She'd inherited her father's analytical mind and her mother's love of storytelling. Dreams of becoming a marine biologist already evident in her detailed journals documenting every piece of sea life she encountered. Her bedroom in Copenhagen displayed carefully labeled collections of shells, rocks, and dried seaweed from family trips throughout the Danish archipelago. The family's arrival on Læsø Island had been picture-perfect, one of those June mornings that makes Danish summers legendary throughout Scandinavia. The ferry crossing from Frederikshavn had been smooth, the family excited to explore an island that embodied Denmark's deepest maritime traditions. They'd specifically requested a traditional Danish summer cottage, the classic deep red paint, with white trim that dots the Nordic coastline, positioned to catch both sunrise over the Kattegat and the endless twilight that defines Danish midsummer nights. But behind the tranquil life in Nordic lands, there were details no one had noticed. Details that would become crucial to understanding how someone can simply disappear in one of the world's most organized and secure regions. When fisherman Lars Pedersen pushed open the cottage door that Tuesday morning, the silence hit him like a physical force. He'd come to check on the Hansen family after noticing their breakfast room light burning all night, unusual for environmentally conscious Copenhagen visitors who typically follow Danish energy conservation habits religiously. The scene that greeted him violated every principle of Danish orderliness. Emma's hot chocolate remained half-finished, a skin forming across the surface. Her spoon rested against the ceramic mug, exactly as if she'd just put it down to answer a question. Beside it, her father's coffee cup still radiated warmth. Lars would later tell investigators that steam actually rose when he lifted it. The family's breakfast plates told a story of interrupted normalcy. Astrid's whole grain bread with Danish honey, one bite missing, Morten's traditional Danish pastry, fork marks showing he'd been eating methodically, Emma's yogurt with fresh berries, the spoon creating small trails through the creamy surface. The cottage itself spoke of a family who'd embraced their Nordic island experience completely. Astrid's research materials covered one corner of the main room. University papers about Læsø's historical significance, guidebooks marked with careful notations about saltwork archaeology, local folklore books borrowed from the island's tiny library. Morten's architectural sketches documented every traditional building they'd encountered, his precise hand capturing details of centuries-old Danish construction techniques. Emma's presence filled the space despite her absence. Her marine biology collection occupied the front windowsill, shells organized by species, labeled in her careful handwriting with both Danish and Latin names. Her favorite Danish fairy tale book lay open to The Little Mermaid, with her notes comparing Andersen's original dark ending to the sanitized versions she'd encountered in other countries. Her journal contained detailed observations about the Kattegat's unique ecosystem, drawings of seabirds, pressed flowers from coastal dunes. But the most disturbing detail was the family's complete preparedness for whatever they'd planned. There, Danish outdoor gear remained neatly arranged, waterproof jackets hanging by the door, hiking boots lined up with typical Danish precision, Morten's professional camera equipment carefully packed in its case. Yet they'd left everything behind, including their phones stacked neatly on the kitchen table, behavior completely inconsistent with Danish safety consciousness. The island's response was immediate and comprehensive, embodying the cooperative efficiency that defines Danish society. Within an hour of Lars's discovery, every fishing boat on Læsø had volunteered for maritime search operations. The Danish Coast Guard dispatched vessels from the mainland. Local police coordinated with Copenhagen headquarters to establish systematic search protocols that reflected decades of Nordic maritime rescue experience. If you're interested in mysteries of disappearances in Nordic landscapes, leave a like to help us continue bringing these unique stories from Scandinavia, because what we discovered about the first hours of the search would reveal how even the most efficient systems can fail before the vastness of Nordic nature. As investigation, teams from Copenhagen established their base on Læsø Island. They encountered the unique challenges that define Nordic coastal mysteries. The island's position in the Kattegat creates weather conditions that can shift within minutes. What begins as perfect Danish summer weather can transform into a proper Nordic storm, with waves reaching dangerous heights that have claimed vessels. Throughout Danish maritime history, Læsø Island itself presents a landscape unlike anywhere else in the Nordic world. For over 1,000 years, residents had harvested salt from shallow coastal pools, creating an intricate network of dikes, channels, and evaporation ponds that only long-time islanders truly understood. These historical salt works had made Læsø wealthy during medieval times, when Danish salt was traded throughout Scandinavia and beyond. But the same geographical features that created prosperity also created countless hidden dangers, channels that appeared safe during low tide, but became deadly traps when Nordic waters rose, salt marsh areas that could support human weight during dry conditions, but became treacherous bogs after rain. The Hansen family's rental cottage occupied a position that revealed the island's complex relationship with the sea. Built on the foundation of a traditional salt worker's house, it offered spectacular views of the Kattegat's ever-changing moods, while sitting directly above underground chambers that had once stored harvested salt. Local archives revealed that several buildings in this area had been abandoned during particularly severe winters, when underground salt deposits had shifted, causing structural instabilities that made habitation dangerous. Danish investigators found the family's behavior in the cottage increasingly puzzling as they examined the evidence more carefully. Astrid's research materials showed she'd been studying not just Læsø's tourist attractions, but its darker maritime history. Stories of ships that had run aground on hidden reefs, accounts of salt workers who'd disappeared during harvest seasons, folklore about supernatural forces that allegedly inhabited the island's most remote areas during midsummer nights. Morton's architectural sketches revealed professional fascination with structures that existed at the boundary between land and sea. His detailed drawings documented not just traditional buildings, but also the ruins of saltworks that were only visible during extreme low tides. His notes described phenomena that experienced islanders knew but rarely discussed. How certain atmospheric conditions could expose sections of seafloor that normally remained underwater, revealing archaeological treasures that had been hidden for centuries. Emma's journal entries became increasingly excited as the family's stay progressed. Her writing described unusual marine life activity she'd observed from the cottage windows, phosphorescent plankton that created trails of light in the water during specific weather conditions, seal populations that behaved differently around the island's hidden channels, underwater formations that seemed to change shape depending on tidal conditions and lunar cycles. The investigation revealed that the night of the family's disappearance had been meteorologically extraordinary for the Danish coast. Weather records showed an unusual combination of atmospheric pressure, tidal conditions, and lunar positioning that occurred perhaps once every 15 to 20 years. Local fishermen described how such conditions could temporarily expose portions of the seafloor around Læsø Island, creating walking paths that had existed since Viking times but were normally submerged beneath several meters of Nordic water. But as the investigation advanced through the inhospitable Nordic landscapes, each new piece of evidence only deepened the mystery, confronting investigators with the reality that Nordic nature guards its secrets mercilessly. Three primary theories developed as Danish investigators delved deeper into the Nordic mystery surrounding the Hansen family's disappearance, each reflecting the unique environmental and cultural challenges of life in the Danish maritime world. The first theory focused on Læsø's extraordinary tidal phenomenon. Danish oceanographic experts from the Technical University of Denmark explained how the island's position creates tidal patterns unlike anywhere else in the Nordic region. During specific combinations of lunar phases, atmospheric pressure, and seasonal conditions, water levels around certain areas of the island could drop dramatically, exposing historical walking paths that connected Læsø to nearby skerries and sandbars. These paths had been used by salt workers for centuries, but they required intimate knowledge of timing and weather patterns. The theory suggested that the Hansen family, fascinated by Astrid's research into medieval Danish trade routes, had attempted to explore these temporarily exposed areas during the night and been caught by rapidly returning tides. Marine archaeologist Dr. Kirsten Müller supported this theory with evidence from historical shipping records. During medieval times, Danish merchants had used these temporary land bridges to transport salt without boat travel, but always with experienced guides who understood the precise timing required. Modern visitors, even intelligent ones like the Hansen family, might not comprehend how quickly Nordic tidal forces could transform safe passage into deadly trap. The second theory examined the psychological effects of Nordic white nights on urban Danish families. Sleep research specialists from Copenhagen University Hospital explained how the extreme light conditions during Danish midsummer could severely disrupt circadian rhythms, particularly affecting families not accustomed to the intensity of Nordic coastal luminosity. Combined with the hypnotic effect of phosphorescent marine life that Emma had been documenting, the theory proposed that sleep deprivation and atmospheric conditions might have created a form of environmental disorientation. Dr. Anders Holst, who specialized in Nordic seasonal affective phenomena, described cases where intelligent, safety-conscious individuals had made uncharacteristic decisions during periods of extreme daylight exposure. The theory suggested the Hansen family might have experienced a collective episode of judgment impairment, leading them to venture into dangerous coastal areas during conditions that normally would have triggered their well-developed Danish caution. Instincts. The third theory, developed by cultural anthropologists from Aarhus University, focused on the powerful psychological draw that authentic Nordic environments exert on intellectual urban families. Professor Læsø Andersen, who studied Danish cultural relationships with nature, pointed out that the Hansen family represented a demographic particularly susceptible to romantic notions about connecting with ancestral Nordic landscapes. Astrid's research into Danish mythology revealed deep fascination with stories of supernatural beings that inhabited liminal spaces between land and sea. Emma's increasingly excited journal entries suggested growing obsession with experiencing real Nordic marine phenomena beyond the sanitized versions available in Copenhagen. The theory proposed that the family's scholarly approach to their island experience had evolved into something approaching pilgrimage, a desire to authentically experience the Nordic coastal environment that had shaped their cultural identity for generations. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss our next mysteries from Nordic lands, because what happened next would challenge all expectations about disappearances in one of the world's safest regions. Time moves differently. On Nordic islands, 15 years after the Hansen family's disappearance, Læsø Island had absorbed their tragedy into its long history of maritime mysteries, the way ancient saltworks had been reclaimed by dunes and seagrass. The cottage they'd rented remained unchanged, maintained by a Danish landlord who renewed the interior annually but could never bring himself to rent it again. Copenhagen's Missing Persons Unit kept the case officially open, reviewing it each summer when Danish families returned to coastal holidays and the questions inevitably resurfaced. On a morning when autumn storms churned the Kattegat into grey fury, fisherman Niels Sørensen was working deeper waters than usual, following schools of herring that had been driven eastward by unusual weather patterns. At 64, Niels represented the last generation of traditional Danish fishermen, who read water conditions through instinct developed over decades of intimate relationship with these Nordic seas. His boat, the Astrid Marie, carried equipment that would have seemed miraculous 15 years earlier, GPS systems that tracked nets with precision beyond anything available during the original search for the Hansen family. The catch felt wrong from the beginning. Niels's experienced hands detected unusual weight distribution as he hauled in nets from depths where the Kattegat dropped suddenly into underwater canyons carved by millennia of tidal action. The resistance was wrong, not the fluid struggle of fish, but something solid, something that had been resting on the sea floor for a very long time. When the nets broke the surface, Niels saw what would change everything: the distinctive dark blue of a Danish rental car, its Copenhagen license plates still faintly visible through 15 years of marine growth and algae accumulation. The vehicle hung suspended in his nets like a metal whale, seawater cascading from every opening, barnacles and seaweed creating a grotesque decoration that spoke of long submersion in Nordic waters. Niels's first call was to the Danish coast guard, his voice steady despite the magnitude of his discovery. Within hours, marine investigation units had established a perimeter around the submerged vehicle's original location. Danish authorities deployed specialized recovery equipment designed for the challenging conditions of Nordic underwater operations. The car's recovery revealed preservation that astonished investigators. The cold Kattegat waters and protective algae growth had created near-perfect conditions for maintaining evidence. Inside, Danish forensic specialists found personal belongings that confirmed their worst fears while answering questions that had haunted two nations for 15 years. Morton's professional architectural tools remained secured in their case, the precision instruments barely affected by their underwater storage. Astrid's research materials, protected by the vehicle's sealed environment, showed extensive notes about Læsø's traditional salt routes, tidal patterns, and the specific meteorological conditions that could expose hidden archaeological sites. Emma's marine biology books contained handwritten observations about phosphorescent plankton, underwater plant life, and the unique ecosystem where fresh water from Danish rivers meets the ancient saltiness of Nordic seas. But the most crucial evidence was Morten's smartphone, found in the car's center console. Despite 15 years of submersion, Danish digital forensic specialists managed to extract data from the device's protected memory systems. The final photos, time-stamped at 3:47 a.m. on that June morning, revealed everything. The images showed the Hansen family standing beside their car on what appeared to be exposed seafloor. But what local fishermen would recognize as one of Læsø's legendary hidden salt roads, underwater pathways that became temporarily accessible during extraordinary tidal conditions that occurred perhaps twice per decade. And it was at this moment that the investigation took a completely unexpected turn, revealing that Nordic landscapes hide mysteries much deeper than anyone could imagine. The discovery of the Hansen family's submerged vehicle triggered the most comprehensive maritime search operation in modern Danish coastal history. Copenhagen authorities deployed resources representing the full technological capability of Nordic search and rescue services, treating the 15-year-old case as if the family had disappeared yesterday. The Danish Defense Command contributed naval vessels equipped with sonar technology originally developed for North Sea oil platform operations, while specialized diving units brought equipment tested in the treacherous waters around Greenland and the Faroe Islands. International cooperation reflected the deep bonds of Nordic mutual assistance that define Scandinavian relationships. Swedish Coast Guard units crossed from Göteborg, bringing underwater robots designed for Baltic Sea archaeological work. Norwegian maritime rescue specialists contributed diving equipment specifically developed for fjord exploration and underwater cave systems. Finnish marine units, experienced in the challenging archipelago waters that define their coastline, joined systematic grid searches of the sea floor around the submerged car's location. The search focused on reconstructing exactly what had happened during those mysterious early morning hours 15 years earlier. Danish oceanographers from the Royal Naval Academy created detailed computer models of tidal patterns on the night of disappearance, confirming that extraordinary conditions had indeed exposed sections of seafloor that normally remained under 3 to 5 meters of Nordic water. These exposures created temporary land bridges connecting Læsø Island to smaller skerries and sandbars, pathways that had been used by Danish salt workers for over a millennium, but required precise timing and intimate knowledge of local conditions. Marine. Archaeologists from the National Museum of Denmark became integral to the investigation, as underwater surveys revealed extensive ruins of medieval salt production facilities. The exposed foundations that had fascinated the Hansen family were part of an industrial complex dating to the 13th century, when Læsø salt was traded throughout the Nordic world and beyond. These structures, hidden beneath the Kattegat, for centuries only became visible during rare combinations of astronomical and meteorological factors that aligned perhaps twice per generation. Advanced sonar mapping revealed the tragic sequence of events with heartbreaking clarity. The Hansen family had driven their rental car onto the temporarily exposed seafloor to reach archaeological sites that represented the culmination of Astrid's research and Emma's growing fascination with Nordic marine archaeology. But the same tidal forces that had created this extraordinary opportunity also ensured its deadly conclusion. Digital reconstruction showed how rising waters had surrounded their vehicle within hours of the family's arrival at the archaeological site. The underwater terrain revealed evidence of their attempts to reach higher ground, following ancient salt worker paths that led toward elevated areas of the temporarily exposed sea floor. But the geography that had once made Læsø prosperous, intricate networks of channels and salt evaporation pools, had become a deadly maze for visitors unfamiliar with its patterns. Danish rescue teams worked in continuous shifts, their systematic search patterns expanding across underwater landscape that revealed the full scope of Læsø's hidden archaeology. Every piece of Nordic maritime technology was employed. Remotely operated vehicles, originally designed for North Sea industrial operations, diving suits tested in Arctic conditions, underwater cameras capable of functioning in the challenging visibility conditions created by stirred sediment and marine growth. Share this video with someone fascinated by Nordic mysteries. They'll be impressed by this revelation, and by what's about to be revealed about the secrets that Nordic lands guard. After 3 weeks of intensive searching, using every available resource of Danish maritime technology, dive teams made the discovery that would finally resolve the 15-year mystery. In an underwater cave system, carved by centuries of tidal action and hidden within the archaeological site, they found what remained of the Hansen family. The location was tragically logical, a natural shelter where they had sought refuge as rising Nordic waters cut off their escape route from the temporarily exposed seafloor. The cave system had preserved evidence of their final hours with devastating clarity. Danish forensic specialists found Morten's waterproof architectural notebook containing detailed sketches of the medieval saltworks, drawings made even as they realized their desperate situation. His professional training was evident in measurements, and structural analyses continued even under extreme duress, documenting archaeological discoveries that would normally have brought him international recognition. The sketches showed salt evaporation pools, storage chambers, and distribution channels that revealed the sophisticated engineering behind Læsø's medieval prosperity. Astrid's research materials, protected by waterproof academic storage, included her final observations about the bioluminescent plankton that had initially attracted the family to explore during the Nordic White Night. Her notes described the ethereal beauty of phosphorescent marine life dancing through the exposed archaeological structures, creating a spectacle that must have seemed magical to a family passionate about authentic Nordic experiences. Her final entries revealed growing awareness of their dangerous situation, combined with scholarly excitement about witnessing phenomena that occurred perhaps once in a generation. Emma's marine biology journal contained her last entry, written in careful, 12-year-old handwriting that described magical lights dancing in the water like fairy tale spirits. Her observations about marine life thriving in the exposed saltwork pools showed scientific curiosity maintained, even as their situation became desperate. Her final drawings depicted sea creatures she'd never encountered before, species that inhabited the unique ecosystem created where medieval Danish engineering met natural tidal pools. Physical evidence revealed the family's systematic attempts to survive using their combined expertise and Danish problem-solving methodology. They had constructed a shelter within the cave, using stones from the ancient saltworks, creating a space that demonstrated Morten's architectural knowledge, Astrid's research into Nordic survival techniques learned from historical accounts, and Emma's understanding of marine ecosystems to locate fresh water seeping through limestone cave walls. The cave's configuration showed they had initially believed rescue was possible. Emergency markers created from Astrid's bright academic scarves were positioned to be visible from underwater approaches. Morten's architectural tools had been used to create sound amplification devices designed to signal searchers. Emma's marine biology equipment had been arranged to collect and purify drinkable water. Their efforts showed intelligence, cooperation, and hope maintained even as their situation became increasingly hopeless. But the Kattegat is merciless. Danish maritime experts determined that the cave would have been completely submerged within 6 hours of the family's entry, the rising Nordic waters following tidal patterns that had governed these channels since the last ice age. The same astronomical forces that had revealed the archaeological wonder also sealed their fate with mechanical precision that allowed no human intervention or rescue. The most poignant evidence was Emma's waterproof phone, which contained a voice message never sent. In clear Danish, her young voice described the incredible beauty of the hidden archaeological site, her excitement about experiencing something no one had seen for centuries, her wonder at the marine life thriving in environments where medieval Danish craftsmanship met natural Nordic forces. Even facing death, she maintained the intellectual curiosity and cultural pride that had defined her family's approach to their Nordic heritage. But even with all advanced technology and Nordic search, questions remained unanswered that would echo forever through the vast Scandinavian landscapes. The resolution of the Hansen family mystery affected Læsø Island's community with profound complexity. relief mixed with devastating sadness that would reshape the island's relationship with its maritime heritage for generations. For 15 years, residents had lived with uncertainty that challenged their fundamental understanding of their safe Nordic environment. Learning the truth brought closure, but at a terrible emotional cost that revealed how tragedy could emerge from the very cultural values that defined Danish coastal life. The island community organized memorial services following traditional Danish customs that honored both the family's scholarly achievements and their tragic end. Local craftsmen, using techniques passed down through generations of Læsø salt workers, created a monument from limestone blocks taken from the same medieval archaeological site that had fascinated the Hansen family. The memorial was positioned on the island's highest elevation, overlooking waters that had provided both livelihood and loss for Nordic communities across centuries. The monument's inscription, composed in Danish with English translation, reflected the complex emotions surrounding the family's fate. To the Hansen family, their curiosity honored our heritage, their loss reminds us to respect the sea. The ceremony drew visitors from throughout Denmark and beyond, including academic colleagues of Morten and Astrid, who came to honor friends whose passion for Nordic culture had led them into their final adventure. Danish maritime authorities implemented comprehensive changes to coastal safety protocols throughout the Nordic archipelago as direct result of the Hansen case. New warning systems were installed on islands across the Danish territorial waters, specifically addressing the dangers of extreme tidal conditions and exposed seafloor areas. The case became mandatory study material for Danish maritime rescue training programs, illustrating how even experienced Nordic coastal environments can present unexpected hazards to visitors from urban areas. The archaeological discoveries made possible by the Hansen family's tragedy led to significant revelations about medieval Danish maritime commerce and engineering. The underwater salt works represent the best preserved examples of medieval Danish industrial architecture discovered in modern times, providing insights into how Nordic communities developed their distinctive relationship with marine environments. Danish museums now display artifacts recovered from the site, exhibitions that always acknowledge the human cost of these historical revelations. Copenhagen University established the Hansen Family Research Fund, supporting interdisciplinary studies that combine Danish cultural heritage research with marine archaeology and coastal safety education. The fund particularly encourages research that honors the family's academic approach to understanding Nordic coastal environments, while promoting safety awareness for future researchers exploring similar sites throughout Scandinavia. Local schools throughout Denmark now include the Hansen case in curricula about coastal safety and cultural heritage, teaching children about the importance of respecting natural forces while celebrating their Nordic heritage. The story has become part of Danish educational tradition, ensuring that future generations understand both the beauty and danger inherent in their relationship with Nordic maritime environments. And so, while some answers were found in the merciless Nordic landscapes, others remain buried forever in the eternal mists and infinite silence of Nordic lands. The Hansen family's story illuminates fundamental truths about the relationship between Nordic peoples and the coastal environments that have shaped Scandinavian civilization for millennia. Their tragedy reflects the eternal tension between compelling beauty of these landscapes and inherent dangers that have claimed lives throughout Nordic history, from Viking voyagers to modern families seeking authentic cultural connections. Danish society has always celebrated the integration of human intellect with natural wonder, viewing the relationship between mind and environment as essential to Nordic identity. The Hansen family embodied these cultural values perfectly, approaching Læsø Island not as casual tourists seeking simple recreation, but as engaged participants in Danish heritage who understood their coastal holiday as opportunity for genuine cultural and scientific discovery. Their scholarly curiosity led them to archaeological revelations that enriched human understanding of medieval Danish civilization, discoveries that now benefit researchers throughout the Nordic world. Yet this same intellectual passion, combined with inadequate appreciation for the raw power of natural forces, created conditions for tragedy that no amount of education or cultural sophistication could prevent. The case demonstrates how Nordic coastal environments can deceive even knowledgeable, safety-conscious visitors. The same tidal forces that created Denmark's distinctive archipelago geography, that enabled maritime trade networks, which built Danish prosperity, that supported salt industries which once made Læsø Island wealthy throughout the Nordic world, these same forces operate according to patterns that transcend human understanding or technological control. Modern Danish society, with its advanced emergency response systems and comprehensive safety infrastructure, sometimes underestimates the fundamental unpredictability of natural forces that shaped Nordic civilization. The Hansen family's tragedy serves as a sobering reminder that respect for these environments must combine intellectual appreciation with practical humility. Even in one of the world's most safety-conscious and technologically advanced cultures, nature retains ultimate power to transform wonder into tragedy within hours. Their story continues to influence how Danish families approach coastal holidays, how educational institutions teach about Nordic heritage, and how maritime authorities prepare for rescue operations in challenging Nordic environments. The Hansen family's legacy ensures that future generations will approach their coastal heritage with both appropriate reverence and necessary caution. This case reminds us that even in the world's most organized and secure societies, the vastness of Nordic nature remains a human mystery, capable of making people simply disappear, leaving only echoes in the eternal landscapes of Scandinavia. If this story of disappearance in Nordic lands impressed you, leave a like. Subscribe to the Nordic Missing channel, share with those interested in Scandinavian mysteries, and activate the bell for our next cases. In the comments, tell us your theory about this disappearance. We love your perspectives. And remember, in the vast Nordic landscapes, there are always more mysteries waiting in the eternal mists of the north. Until the next mystery from Scandinavian lands,